Good afternoon. Really great to see all of you here for this important forum on the impact of water adjudication on all of us. My name's Jim Britton, and I'm currently the president of the City Club Board. The mission of City Club is to inform, connect, and engage our community in The mission of City Club is to inform, connect, engage our community to strengthen the civic health of our region. We emphasize civil conversations and listening to others. We begin by acknowledging with humility that the land we are here today is the territory of the people of the Salish Sea. Their presence is imbued in the waterways, shorelines, mountains, and valleys of the traditional people of the Coast Salish people. And it has been that way since time immemorial. I'd like to start by thanking those of you who are volunteers today. Thank you very much. Without your work, we couldn't be here today. And I'd also like to thank those of you who are our sponsors. T-South St. Joseph Medical Center, Bruce and Claudia Descend, Danny Neal, real estate broker with the Moyot Group, Firehouse Arts and Event Center, Colshan CPAs, the Opportunity Council, Pacific Continental Realty, Unity Care Northwest, Village Books, Western Washington University, Whatcom Community Foundation, the Salish Current, and Baron Quinn Maxwell. Let's give them all a hand, please. Also, a big thanks to our caterer today, Good Bowls, and our videographers, Talking to Crows. So for those of you who are here and are not members, I'd like to encourage you to seriously consider becoming a member. Membership provides the a large part of the financial support for us to continue to do what we're doing. And you do get a little bit of a price break on the dinners, or the lunches. So the dues are $40 a person, $70 for a household of two, $10 for those 25 and under. So if you're interested in becoming a member, you could go to the website and register there. You could take care of it here by seeing our treasurer, who will be sitting on the registration table back there. There he is, Zach. Or there are orange or yellow forms on the table, and you can fill that out and leave it there, and we'll follow up with getting your money for your dues. Our next meeting will be our economic future through ports from Seattle to Bellingham. And it'll look at the legal and practical effects of port authorities throughout the state, including locally. And the speakers will include Fred Fetterman, who's one of the commissioners for the Seattle Port Authority, Kathy Pettis, past president of the Washington Public Ports Authority and current commissioner for the Anacortes Port Authority. And among other things, it'll address the pros and cons of increasing the number of commissioners in the Bellingham port from 3 to 5. Should be a good program. There we go. All right, so I'll wrap up by please reminding you to, if you haven't already done so, silence your phones. And with that, I will turn it over to our moderator for today, panel, Dan Reyes. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Jim. Can everyone hear me? This is a brand new mic that we're trying out today. So,
It doesn't.
a little louder. Can we do that without getting a whole lot of feedback? Maybe if I don't turn my head. Okay, well, we'll see where we go. As said, I'm Dan Rass. I'm a member of the City Club Program Committee. We're responsible for choosing the program, finding the speakers, and setting up the program as we can. I'm told today that in addition to our speakers, that we have two people here from the Department of Ecology. Is that true? There they are over there in the back. Sheila Coughlin, who is the Senior Environmental Planner, and Kelly Hamilton, who has this great title of being the Bellingham Field Office Adjudication Unit Supervisor. And Sheila and Kelly will be here throughout the program, but we want you to pay attention to the panelists. But after the program as well, they have a bunch of forms if you're interested. They'll be able to help you with some of the technical details of the adjudication. I want to start by remembering a day 170 years ago, January 22nd, 1855. On that day, several thousand people who were members of the indigenous groups that were here, now today we would call them tribes, gathered with the Treaty Commission down at Whatcom. And it was January 22nd. Most of the Nooksack members who were going to come down couldn't come down the river because it was frozen solid. So getting 2,000 to 3,000 people from around Whatcom north and some of the south to sign the treaty was a momentous occasion. And that happened 170 years ago today. Many of the Point Elliott tribes, because of course there are 5 treaties, the Point Elliott tribes, many celebrate Treaty Day. So the program committee we're trying to put together a water program for years. We'd spend an hour and a half talking about it. We would then come up with an idea and look at it carefully. So that's a 3-hour program. We don't have 3 hours. So finally we bit the bullet. Fortunately, a lot of parts of the program we could have had have been resolved through the adjudication. We have today's program. The theme of this program is why should those of us who are not directly affected by the adjudication, and you may not know that if you are or not, approximately 30,000 people in the county and some outside the county will get a summons in the near future. Those are the people who are directly affected. The rest of us, me included, get our water from somebody else, like the city of Bellingham, like the city of Ferndale, like the water district number 10 or number 8, or your local water association, which would be a party, so would Water 10 and Water 8, and so will the city. But why should we, who are not directly affected, pay attention to what's going on? And that's basically why we have asked folks, our panelists, to come today and speak on their areas of expertise. I would note that last week there have been 2 articles in the local press, one in the Salish Current, one in Cascadia Daily News, outside their paywall, about the water adjudication, and I would commend those 2 articles to you for background and information. So, in order to save time, I will not be introducing the panelists because their biographies are on your table. The order that we're going to talk today starts out with Bob Carmichael, who as you see is an attorney with Carmichael Clark. We'll do 2 things. Number 1, he will tell us the current status of the adjudication itself, which is a major lawsuit filed by the Department of Ecology against roughly 30,000 people. And what we can maybe expect in the future. Bob also represents a couple of smaller municipalities and a bunch of water districts and water associations. He will then say why, if you're not a member of those groups, why you should be paying attention to this and what might happen. We'll then continue with Perry Eskridge, who is with the Building Association and the Whatcom Association of Realtors. As you may imagine, they have a pretty strong interest in water. And Bob will talk about how their interests should pique your interest. Fred Leckel will follow. Fred is with Whatcom Family Farmers. Clearly, our agricultural community is directly involved, and they're very, very interested and want every one of us to understand where their interests lie. Fred will be followed by Andrew Russell, who is with Resources, who has, as you almost certainly know, Resources is generally interested in the environment and the natural habitat. They will talk about what's going on in the point of view, why we should pay attention as a general rule. And Victor Johnson from Lummi Nation, who's on Deputy Director of the Lummi Natural Resources Department and on the Lummi Water Team, will conclude. We will begin with each speaker having 8 minutes, except for Bob, because he has 2 roles, so I've got 12. And we do have a timer. When the speaker is getting close to their time limit, they will see if a little pad says 15 minutes, 15 seconds. They only have 15 minutes for it. And then after the 15 seconds are by, if you don't stop quickly, then one of us will begin making rude noises. So, City Club, as Jim said, is formed to have civil conversations about civil interests. We say that we want to bring light and not heat to topics of general interest, even though, as here, there may be people who would disagree violently about what's going on or what should go on. Water is perhaps there's an apocryphal saying, I'll attribute it to something overheard in a bar in Montana, but other people claim about authorship. And talking about water, certainly among water lawyers, this phrase is, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting.
Mark Twain. Mark Twain.
Yeah, but I don't think Mark Twain originated it. Bob?
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for all your work in bringing this together, and Jim for all your work with the City Club. And thank everybody for coming. This is an interesting topic to me, being a lawyer that practices in land use and water law. I've told a number of people I've basically waited my whole career for this to happen, and now it's going to start and go on for 40 years. The adjudication, I'm going to give you some background on the adjudication, because in terms of being able to tell you what's going to happen, I really don't know. I can guess, and I may give you some guesses and speculation, but I don't know what's going to happen any more than anybody else does, really. I can tell you what's been going on to date, and that's where I'll start. That's where my 4 minutes come in, and I may go over and poach from my other part. With respect to the adjudication, it was filed on May 1st of 2024 by Department of Ecology in filing a statement of facts and a map of the Wyra 1 water resource area. That's what kicked it off. That's statutorily required, and that's what they did. Ever since May 1 of 2024, there's been work going on at the Department of Ecology and hearings at Superior Court to decide, well, what's going to be said in the claim form? What's the summons going to look like? What's the court instruction to the people who are getting this stack of paper delivered to them in the mail saying, greetings, welcome to Whatcom County Superior Court. What's all this going to look like, and what's it going to say? That decision has now been made after a few hearings. January 7th, 2025, the Superior Court issued an order that entered a direction to the Department of Ecology to issue the summons in the form that's contemplated. And that's going to commence the action. Now, there's going to be another hearing on February 3rd, which they're going to be subtracting and adding to the list of people who are going to be getting this document in the mail, or set of documents. And what people will be getting who are being served will be a summons, and it actually is service, legal service by mail with a summons. So you won't have a process server if you're getting one, but people who get one will be served by mail with a summons. There will be a claim form that will be with that, and everyone who has a water claim that they want to assert in the adjudication will need to fill that out. There will be claim form instructions, which are quite detailed, and there will be a court information sheet that also gives more information to people. After that summons has been served and all the information provided, then the people who receive them, if they want to assert a claim for water use, and this is not just people, by the way, this is anyone who, any entity, business, government, municipality, any entity that is asserting a claim is going to have to file one of these claims. And in some cases where multiple water rights are being asserted, they'll file multiple claim forms. The deadline for submitting the claim form will be May 1 of 2026, or 1 year after you were actually served with the document, whichever is later. So at the minimum, somebody will have until, or an entity will have until May 1 of 2026 to file that claim. And filing that claim is absolutely necessary. If it's not timely filed, I'm not aware of second chances at this. So maybe there will be some, but presently not. So either May 1, 2026, or if you were served after May 1, 2025, you get that extra time so that you have a full year. And then what happens? Well, really, potentially nothing. Ecology is going to have to start evaluating the claims, but before that, there's a 3-year time period from the time that the claim is filed until people can no longer submit evidence. So once that claim form is submitted, somebody who's asserting the claim has an additional 3 years to bring forward evidence to support that claim. So now we're talking 2029 is when those claims will really be in a position to fully be evaluated. It seems like a long time, but that was what the legislature came up with a couple years ago when they were kicking off this adjudication and figuring out how they were going to fund it. So what happens in the meantime? It's really not going to be entirely clear at this point what's going to happen in the meantime, but the court is working on, the Superior Court is working on additional civil rules to try to make sure the process goes fairly smoothly. If there are, I don't know how many claimants there will be, but if there are 30,000 or even if there's 10,000, it's still the hugest thing that the court's seen, I think, and unrealistic to have service accomplished by mail, trying to, if someone, for example, imagine wants to file a motion do you file a motion and serve 10,000 people? So there have to be new rules that are developed to guide this process, and the court is working on those. What it looks like is going to happen is there will be a docket sheet. This isn't finalized, but it looks like there will be a docket sheet published of all the new pleadings in the case on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And that'll be available online for people to look at and see if there's something that they need to respond to, or if somebody wants to file some kind of a motion, that's how it will be done. But as I said, the rules are under construction currently by the court. The court has appointed a 12-member steering committee to provide recommendations on these rules. I happen to be one of the members of the steering committee. We're meeting every week trying to come up with recommendations for the court. Don't blame me if things don't go perfectly, please. We're doing the best we can to try to make it an inclusive process for people, number one, who may not be lawyers that want to represent themselves, but also, even for lawyers, this is a huge task and very unprecedented in terms of how to respond and how the rules will work. The interesting thing that you see now, because I'm sure you've all read what Dan produced on the primer of Washington water law, you'll know that the prior appropriation doctrine is what governs. So the water right of somebody else being established that's senior to a junior water right holder, if you're a junior water right holder, that could affect you. And so people may not want to just weigh in on their own water rights, but they're going to want to weigh in. And when I say people, I use that generally. Again, governments, water districts, cities, tribes, everybody who has an interest in this is going to be looking at what others are doing. Because what others do and what others claim could definitely affect their position under the prior appropriation doctrine. That's something that is going to evolve over time in terms of how do we even start to make decisions on something like this. I don't know, again, is the short answer, how the court's going to do it. What I do think is likely to happen is, in addition to these new rules, there will probably be some pretrial orders issued at some point that'll direct people as to how the process is supposed to work. I do expect that there will be decisions made in smaller bite-sized chunks, maybe on a basin-by-basin basis, maybe the Bertrand Creek watershed, for example, maybe Fish Trap Creek, maybe Drayton or Dakota Creek. However it's ordered, I do expect some of the work of the court to be on a basin-by-basin basis and establishing sub-cases. It could also be done by issue. There might be some discrete proceedings based on issues by party. The big player in I think in all of this is the tribal interest. The Lummi and Nooksack tribes will have a priority date that commences at least effective as of the date of the treaty, and under the prior appropriation doctrine, seniority is everything. So whatever those rights are really going to have a big impact on everyone else's rights. And that's something that, again, this is and I'm not speaking for anybody up here other than myself. I do think determining the tribal rights is going to be an important thing to do relatively early on, so that folks know what they're dealing with after that. And by the way, that's not going to be a simple task. That's going to be a very complicated task. There's all kinds of legal issues associated with it, and it's going to take years, in my opinion, to figure all that out. With respect to some of the other issues, as most of you know, This isn't just about surface water. Like in the Aquabella case, many of you know there was a water right adjudication in the Yakima Basin that concluded after 40 years. This is surface water and groundwater, has many more claimants than that one did. So it's going to take a while to work through all of those things. And I would expect, similar to Aquabella, that there will be a decision made on certain discrete issues that will be final before the final decree is entered, when the whole thing wraps up. So you won't have to wait however long it is. I say 40 years. I know some people like to be optimistic and say, 10 years, 20 years. I've heard every number you can imagine. Nobody says less than 10 years. But it's impossible to do it that quickly. I see that I've been given my 15 seconds, so I am going to leave the rest of it to the rest of the panel and consider my speech as having told you a little bit about the adjudication, because I think it's important to know some of that stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks to all of you for having me here to talk about the economic impact on housing construction. I think you'll hear from my notes. It's going to be really depressing. I tell people there's 3 guarantees with this adjudication. One, nobody's going to be happy. The second one is that if you don't file your claim form, this is when I'm talking to people that are asking, well, if I just ignore it, what happens? And my answer is, if you just ignore it, I guarantee you will lose your water rights. The third guarantee is, and this is one that makes me happy, I won't care what the ending is because I'll be dead. I was asked to talk about economic impacts, and I'm going to do that really quickly here. 8 minutes. I'm sure Bob could talk for 4 or 5 days. I could probably talk for a day, but we get 8 minutes. Back in 2019, some of you may remember the Whatcom County Business and Commerce Advisory Committee that was established by the Whatcom County Council issued a report, and that report asked the Whatcom County Council to declare a housing emergency. That housing emergency was different from every other discussion on housing because it had absolutely nothing to do with affordability as we typically think about it. It also had nothing to do with the condition of the housing. That housing emergency was based simply on the fact that employers or prospective employers looking to come to Whatcom County could not find housing for those employees that they needed to expand or establish a business here. And right now we're in the middle of updating our comprehensive plan, the plan that's going to govern, population projections, housing, infrastructure, transportation. I mean, you name it, it's going to be in this plan, right? And it's going to be for the next 20-year planning cycle. Taking Bob at his word that a groundwater and surface water adjudication will only last 40 years, that gets us only halfway through the adjudication. But right now, our population is estimated to be about 235,000 people in the county. The middle projection for the population, did I just lose my mic? The middle projection for the population at the end of our planning cycle is 293,000 people. That's about 60,000 people that we're expecting to come to the county in the next 20 years. At the same time, we're wondering if we have enough water for the people who are already here. Are you starting to see where the problem's coming? Right now, the county is planning, and I know Executive Sidhu might disagree with me on this, but the planning estimate is that 14% of that population is expected to be housed in the rural areas, the same areas where these water issues are coming to the fore. I'll add to that Ferndale, which operates off 2 groundwater wells out there, and you probably heard recently that they actually had wells going dry, suspected because of the city's use of those 2 wells. is expected to take about 11,000 more people. That's about 5,000 to 6,000 more homes. Linden is expected to take 10,000 people. That's estimated to be about 5 to 5,500 more homes. Bellingham, 30,000 more people in the next 20 years, 16,000 housing units. We haven't even talked about the impact of climate refugees, Californians that are tired of fires, the World Cup. I don't know if you know this, but we're right in the middle of two of the biggest venues on the West Coast for the World Cup soccer tournament. I believe it's next year. These are some really big issues, and they're all going to have an impact on our housing and construction for the next 20 years. It gets really complicated though. I was at a coordinating council when the mayor of Linden just spouted off this little fact, that ecology told them that Linden had exceeded its water rate, that there was going to be no more water for Linden. Now, I know, Sheila will probably tell you that there's nuances to this, and Mayor Courthouse was also telling me that they have an agreement with ecology, but this is going to be one of the conversations that happens when they're talking about the adjudication. How much water does Linden get? How much water does Ferndale get? How much water does Bellingham get? This is getting a little bit in the weeds, but you know, the cities have a certain amount of water rights to serve the population they have, but they also have what's called an inchoate right, which is that additional amount of water that they need to service the population that will, you know, is yet to come. And ecology has mentioned that they're going to be taking a very strong look at those inchoate rights for the cities in Whatcom County. That has an impact on, you know, where's the water going to come from to serve that population. Ultimately, where do we get? I'm still waiting for Jane to give me 15 seconds.
Time.
Right now, Bellingham is 42nd. No, I'm sorry. Bellingham's affordability index for home buyers is 42 out of 100. That places us squarely 8th worst in the entire state. We're behind Seattle, okay? For first-time home buyers, it's exactly the same, except the rating goes down to 40 out of 100. And it still makes us 8th worst in the state. Speaking on the real estate side of things, I will tell you the realtors have been very busy on the adjudication. You know, we were, originally the statute gave you 60 days to file your claim form, and working with Representative Timmons, we got a bill through the legislature that extended that out to a year to help those claimants be able to fill that claim form out and really, you know, sort of establish what it is they need. The other thing is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what a lis pendens is. It's a document that's actually filed in the county assessor's or county auditor's office that says that there's a lawsuit involved with this property. And if you've ever had or been in the purchase or sale of a property that has a lawsuit filed against it, it makes it very difficult to close. And we went and begged, you know, pleaded, worked with ecology and got them to agree that if realtors and the multiple listing service provided substantial notice to people involved in real estate transactions, that there was an adjudication and that you should establish whether or not the property you're interested in is subject to the adjudication, then they would not file that lis pendens against the property and the property sales could go forward. Just think about this. What is the difference between a house on 5 acres with only 500 gallons of indoor use per day allowed and the value of a house on 5 acres with 5,000 gallons with demonstrated use for irrigation, outdoor watering, indoor watering? What would be the value between those? I'm telling you, it's substantial. So that's it in a nutshell.
Pull the mic closer to you.
Sure. Better? Okay. You know, a piece of advice folks right off the bat, if you're gonna speak in a panel like this, ask to be first. I got people stealing my lines. I mean, Dan started off with a whiskey thing, and I'm like, that's what I was gonna say. And Victor's probably down there going, look, dude, just don't talk about certain things. Like, I know what I want to say. So, apologies if I, anyway, thanks for having me here today. I really do appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation about this topic. You know, if you're like me, you're probably getting a little tired of all the polarization out there in the world. There has been an awful lot of it, and now I value dialogue. And the more conflict you have, the more difficult it is to have that dialogue. So I'm really hoping that we can work on that today and that we can start to move forward on that kind of stuff. I hope that we see some progress, because Dan was right. Whiskey for drinking and water is for fighting. And this subject is one that is more fraught than just about anything else in this situation. So I was asked to give the perspective of the farming community, and I'm going to do so. But I would also want to note up front, it's really important to our farmers to work within the community to find solutions. If there's any good news out of what can be a really negative topic is, we have a lot of great natural resources here, and we have the ability to solve this. We need to be able to work on it together. So in order to understand where the farmers are, I think it's pretty important to understand what farming itself is doing here in Whatcom County. We're already in a decline basically because of beginning before the adjudication had started. I think most of you understand we live in a world where he who produces it the cheapest wins. And for farming here in Whatcom County, that's pretty tough. You know, you continue to see increased costs just occurring just naturally because of where we live. Increased pressures for more people, land prices, regulations, all of these things that make it difficult. Plus, in your farm, if you're competing against people that are living in Mexico and other places that can produce it much cheaper, it just makes it that much more difficult. So as Whatcom County and the surrounding area has grown in population, which in my lifetime it has gone up, it's quadrupled in my lifetime alone here, we continue to just see those increased difficulties, and it's tough to farm here. So now you enter in a water rights adjudication, and suddenly, for farmers anyway, the backbone of everything that they do is very much at risk, because adjudication at its heart is litigation. It's antagonistic, and it's about something, of course, that our survival depends on. So I would say there's probably two levels to this for farming as it relates to the issues, and you need to go back a bit in time and look. I'm going to take it back to the 1940s, where I would say that all the farms that we have right now were in place. Because of how water law evolved, farms were often led to believe, as that Cascadia Daily article had said, that since mostly they get their water from groundwater, that they really didn't need to have to get a water right. It was not something that was pushed out there. It was looked at as an almost unlimited supply. You know, since the farmers pulled their water from groundwater, groundwater was considered then completely separate from streams. And so it looked like there was an unlimited supply. And even when the state started requiring water rights, it was hardly enforced. Knowledge of whether or not you needed a water right often depended on who dug the well. And as a result, the water coverage was really inconsistent. And you can see that when you go down roads. I can go water right, no water right. But then in the 80s, there was a push made by ecology. Let's get folks to come in line and get right. A promise was made, known as the Husband Promise, where go ahead, farmers, apply for water rights, and we'll get you one. It's going to be junior to many of the other water rights that are out there, but you'll at least be legal. Then we had issues, as it was mentioned earlier, about related to what's called hydraulic continuity. Suddenly came in, and people started to recognize, oh, this groundwater is actually connected to the streams. Then we started bringing the Endangered Species Act into it. That, of course, in itself is a huge issue and starts to deal with issues related to the in-stream flows. Whether it was intentional or not, ecology was unable to uphold their promise. And now here we sit 40 years later, and we have a number of farmers who are sitting with applications, but they haven't been able, they've done nothing wrong, nothing for their own problem, but yet they are facing a really uncertain future. And then you've got this second level, which really affects everybody, and that's the in-stream flow issue. Rightfully, the senior rights of the in-stream flows related to the tribes needs to be addressed. But I think it's important to understand when you're looking at these in-stream flows that we don't even come close to meeting what is the current level of in-stream flows during the summer months often. We could add in all of the agriculture uses, and that's not just what gets pulled out of the stream, which is a tiny amount. That includes all of the groundwater and everything. You'd only be adding about 5 to 6% more of the flow back in. The issues are really much, much bigger than this. So what does this mean for our water rights? They're all going to be subject to curtailment, potentially, if we continue down this legal path. Is this expected to happen? Well, I sure hope not. But you got to understand that threat is very real, and it has happened to farms in other areas. We have seen it in places where farms have been shut down completely. And currently, in our current state in the adjudication, we are only talking about the legal process. And that legal process of adjudication doesn't put one drop of water back into the stream. There are no discussions right now going on about how to work together to find these solutions. So as a result, we have to look at that is the end result, that people could very easily be curtailed. When you're a farmer and you're dealing with all these other pressures, that is a risk that is just almost too much. And you're seeing that pressure happen. Bring it to the personal level for farms. You know, when people are faced with a crisis, as probably most of you know, people do one of three things, right? It's fight, flight, or freeze. And that's how this is playing out here. We've got a few large farms that who are invested in this and plan to be here for the future. They're saying, let's figure out how to work on this. Let's put our money into attorneys, whatever that might be. There is a significant number of folks who are just freezing, who are just going, I'm just going to bury my head in the sands and hope that this all works out. They're the kind of guys that will, come to me with a big old gnarled hand and hand me a $300 check and say, I hope you can work this out. And I think, oh man, there's no chance this is going to work. But sadly, we're hearing far more who are talking about flight. They're just looking at, I'm just going to get out of here. This just doesn't work. And of course, what does that look like? Oftentimes they're going, how many houses can I put on here? What does this look like? Pardon? Zero. Well, I don't know if that's true. But I guess what's sad here is you find very, very few farms that are talking about a future in agriculture in Whatcom County. They've struggled with all of those pressures that they put out there. Now they're looking at having to defend their farm, their water rights, and they're going, I don't have any guarantee of success here, even when they talk to expensive attorneys. And so I guess I would finish with, because I have 15 seconds, I realize I painted a dim picture, but I also want to point out that our farmers have said, look, we know adjudication is not a solution, but we have always been working on what those solutions could be, and we've been providing those out there. That could probably be another 8 minutes in and of itself. There are plenty of things that we could do. But again, we need to be able to work together as a community if that's going to happen. So here we are.
So is there any whiskey here? Just asking for a friend. Hi. I have water, I swear. So I'm gonna fight. No. I'm Andrew Russell. There's a lot of familiar faces here. I'm one of the co-executive directors of Resources. For those of you who don't know Resources, we have been an advocate for the environment and the people of Northwest Washington for 40 years. We have been advocating for science-based policy to protect the land, the water, and the climate on which we all depend and on which our livelihoods depend as well. I'm really grateful to be here on this panel today. I've been working in wildlife management, watershed management, land conservation, land affordability, land use planning, climate change, and whatnot in one form or another for probably about 30 years, 25 or more of which has been here in Whatcom County. I have, well, I'll get to more of that later. Just like a little background, like who is Resources? Who am I? Why am I talking about this? I do also want to acknowledge that it is Treaty Day, and I thank Dan for bringing that up, because treaty rights are at the absolute core of this adjudication process and of watershed planning that has been happening in Whatcom County for at least, for a long time, definitely since 1999 when the Watershed Planning Act was passed and a local process was established for working on these issues. So this has been a process in Whatcom County. This is not something that's come about recently. It has been a lot of work to get to the point where we are right now, and just want to acknowledge that. And, getting back to Treaty Day and treaty rights being at the core of this, the Treaty of Point Elliott isn't just something that the tribes and indigenous folks who signed that own. We all own that. The treaty is the law of the land. It predates the formation of the state of Washington. So it has been around, and I think it's important to keep that kind of in our minds. And it's the responsibility really of all of us to uphold that treaty. And so when we're talking about this today, it's very, very appropriate to kind of keep that in our minds. And if you don't know a lot about the Treaty of Point Elliott, today's a great day to learn a little bit more. And there's Treaty Day film festivals, and hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder, I'm sorry.
Just only half.
Just on So I started at Resources in 2014. And before that, I had been working on farmland affordability and development rights and affordable housing. And really, as I started to work on farmland affordability and with the conservation easement program at Whatcom County, the thing that I learned more about than anything else was water rights. And what a mess it was in YR1 and in Washington State. Just complicated, intertwined, interconnected, all the kind of stuff that I love to dig into. So I was excited to be part of a process to try and to see how we could move forward on some of these issues. Also, Resources provides sort of administrative support, and we are a member of the Environmental Caucus to the YRA1 Planning Unit. So YRA1 is another term you'll hear thrown around for the Nooksack watershed. It's essentially most of Whatcom County and goes down just a little bit into Skagit County too. So there is a watershed management planning process and structure here in the Nooksack watershed. And the planning unit is a group that is a multi-stakeholder group that is kind of charged with creation and following of the watershed management plan. We do have a watershed management plan in Whatcom County. It's been updated just a little bit, but not much since 2005. So there has been some issues with some forward movement on watershed management and planning, which have kind of brought us to the point that we're at today. One of the things, and I'll just being upfront, Resources advocated and got thousands of our supporters to advocate for the Nooksack watershed to be chosen as a priority watershed by Ecology for an adjudication. We felt that it was a very, and still feel it's a very necessary piece of the puzzle that needs to get worked on for us to work on a lot of the other pieces that we need to move forward with. We were kind of asked to talk a little bit about our hopes for after the adjudication, and whatever that is. And really my hopes for after the adjudication and Resources' hopes for after the adjudication are very, very similar. Like we can be doing this right now. They're very similar to our priorities for watershed management that exist today and that have existed for a while. Many of the things that we'll be talking about around the adjudication can be worked on now and should be we should be starting that work now. But I do hope that once the adjudication is done, we have an outcome that's actually very similar to what came out of the Aquavella, the Yakima Basin adjudication. I don't want that 40-year process, but the outcome of that was an integrated plan. And it has some issues, for sure. But what we do know is part of that plan, consisted of natural climate solutions and addressing climate change and addressing water use, kind of addressing the compound nature of a lot of these issues. Salmon habitat and salmon recovery were also part of that. Water conservation, water use efficiency, water banking, water exchanges. A lot of these kind of pieces came out of that plan. So we have both the Yakima process to look at, to learn lessons, and we have the end result also to look at and analyze and learn lessons from. And I talked about, also in the Yakima adjudication, there were a lot of positives for agriculture, for the tribes, and for the environment, and those deserve discussion and attention as well. But when I talk about natural climate solutions, this is what I mean. This is the stuff we can be doing today. So natural climate solutions are these sorts of things that have multiple benefits to communities, to the environment, to climate change. They include things like restoring and protecting wetlands. I was just talking to Greg during lunch. An ounce of prevention. So it's much easier to protect an existing wetland or habitat than it is to restore it. So we talk about restoration and protection of wetlands. Multiple benefits there. Other things, ecological forestry management upstream can put more water in the streams when we need it, more cold, clear water for salmon. And then that salmon habitat, whether that's buffers along streams, large woody debris in those streams. Nooksack Tribe is working on that right now. All good stuff that should be part of what we're doing now and part of the outcome of an adjudication. God, I don't think that was 15 seconds, right? Yeah, all right.
I squile. Nautiam. Suitsano hili quan. Is that it? Okay. Suitsano hili. Sanatacho Latiakaya CM. After be in it. Like I'm a new rapper. Pinky out or what? Yeah. Well, I have a little bit more time because more than half my thunder was stolen by the panel, but the panel has been doing a fantastic job of giving a lot of background for water rights, and I'm going to give the perspective from the tribal perspective. My name is Victor Johnson. Everyone knows me as Turtle. I'm the Deputy Director of Lumbee Natural Resources. As stated, this is the remix version, obviously. Let's try that again. Maybe I'm too far away from the receiver? No? Okay. As it's been stated, that the Lumbee Nation is signatory to the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Today is Treaty Day. What I said was Suitsano Hilik Quenas and Atachal Atiakaias. And it's true. I'm happy that you guys are all here learning about water rights, learning about all of these issues that are important to all of us. So as a part of the signatory of the Point Elliott Treaty, there's stuff in there that talks about the Lumbee Nation having the right to an economical, viable homeland. And with that comes water. Also within that same treaty is the right to take fish, salmon. So
can't have salmon without water. There's the Winter's Doctrine that was already spoke, first in time, first in right. And then there was this little lawsuit that was filed back in the 70s, and the tribes were prevailed in 1974, called the Bolt decision, where we were fighting for the right to fish. And with that right to fish is also the right to habitat. And the tribe is, working with the state to get a lot of the culverts fixed. They call it the culvert case, just more recently, dating back to those 2 lawsuits. Lummi's objective is to protect and preserve our senior water rights within the Nooksack Basin. Salmon is our culture. We're the salmon people. We have several ceremonies that go back to salmon. Water rights has been one of the priorities for the Lummi Nation for over 40 years. This isn't our first rodeo with fighting for our treaty rights and our water rights. This is, we fought for on-reservation groundwater rights in the 90s. Just settled, 16 years later. So it's a groundwater lawsuit right there on the peninsula of the Lummi Reservation. Just like everyone is speaking here, Whatcom County has grown quite a bit, tripled in size. With that, there's people. People need water. We understand that. You guys understand that. But we also need to find that balance. The balance between people and salmon. The Nooksack River is already over-allocated. You've heard it here several times. There's more paper rights out there than there are actual rights. So we want to protect our senior water rights in the Nooksack Basin. There's a high number of unpermitted water users that need to be addressed. But with this adjudication, we have the opportunity to bring everybody to the table to find out what those are. Right now, everybody's like, I'm not going to show you what I have until you show me what you have. And we don't understand that. There's a lot of uncertainty. And the uncertainty is scary. It's a human thing to have the uncertainty. But we're also here to say, let's figure out what that uncertainty is. We can work this together. The adjudication will give everyone a clear understanding about what their water rights is and enable a clearer pathway forward for everyone in water management. But a settlement such as that, it cannot happen without in the context, it has to happen within the context of adjudication. So you can't just make these side deals and not use the adjudication. So you need to have that adjudication to keep everybody at the table and talk about the hard things that nobody really wants to talk about. The Lummi Nation has done this in the past. We were this close with everybody here in Whatcom County. And then when it came time to go hand in hand up to the court, nobody wanted to go because it's scary. We all agreed on getting data. We all agreed on which direction we should be going. But when we got that close of walking up to the courthouse together, everybody started to fall off the ends. This is our opportunity now to get everybody at the table and bring them there to talk about water adjudication. We need joint efforts, good data, good neighbors find solutions, and for funding in the long term. That's basically what I had. A lot of people filled in the blanks for me. I just wanted to get my perspective out there as well. I don't need the 8 minutes because a lot of it was taken. Thank you guys for making mine a little bit easier. I got to do a little bit of a remix.
See, Fred was right. Either you should go first or you should go last.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
We had planned, as usual, that on behalf of the program committee, I would ask a question or two, and the panel would have its response, extra couple minutes to respond. But it turns out we have a 2.5-hour water program anyhow. So we're going straight to audience questions. And Jane will have the microphone. Members first.
Yeah. And I'm going to remind everyone that with these mics, they're so-called one-directional mics. So if you hold it over here, they don't work if you hold it down here. So I'm going to try to hold it for you. And if you have specific questions for specific panelists, please say that, and otherwise we'll ask the panelists to figure out who should be responding to the specific questions. So I'm going to start up here.
Hi, Tim Douglas. Thank you very much for your presentations. They really did cover a lot of territory. I'd like to ask you real quickly. Walla Walla County has reached agreement about water allocation, and they have a thoroughly prosperous vineyard and wine production that is known worldwide now as a result of an agreement that was reached prior to adjudication amongst all the stakeholders to deal with water, and therefore water has really driven that particular development for agriculture, for everybody else. So anyway, anybody with any quick insights into what it is that they accomplished that we might want to emulate a bit?
Anyone want to take that? Fred?
Yeah, and I am speaking, my knowledge of the Walla Walla is much different than I'm with Andrew. I understand much more what happened in the Yakima than in the Walla Walla. And I had also heard that they've been having some struggles again. Maybe wasn't all as all that it was cracked up to be. But yes, the big thing there is they got together and they pushed for, let's find solutions. Let's work together to find those solutions. And we haven't been able to get there here. We just haven't been able to do that. I also know that when you get to the east side, it's different because a lot of times there you're dealing with water districts they hold much of the water rights. Here we have, as was mentioned, we get upwards of 30,000 people, and they all have their individual wells that are dug in. There it was canals, and you're working, it's a much simpler process. So that was part of it as well.
Anyone else on the panel want to comment on that? Andrew?
Yeah, I also don't know a lot about Walla Walla, but one thing I will say, just thinking about Yakima, Walla Walla, and really Southern California and the Southwest in general, a lot of issues that we tend to go back and forth on and struggle with here in Western Washington are very common in places that are much, much drier. They have been dealing with these issues in a much more kind of in-your-face kind of way, and I think climate change impacts and what we're learning more and more about 1.5 degrees centigrade, rise in temperature, we're headed towards 2. Fred said it. We have a lot to work with here in Whatcom County. We have a lot of water, usually when we don't want it, and not enough when we do. But we can get a lot done here. But we have to start agreeing on some of the real big problems in climate change and its impacts. Do not care, if you believe it or not. Like they're coming, they're here, they're happening. And I think thinking about these areas that have faced water shortages on a much more kind of larger scale than us, it's good to look at them for solutions, and and it's good to be grateful for what we have.
Question in the back? Yes. Question in the back?
Hi, my name is William Moore.
Hold the mic right in front of your mouth.
Okay, my name is William Moore. I'm a Speak Club member.
Jane, is that mic on?
It's It's got a green light, so it could be on. My name is William Moore. I'm a city club member.
Speak loudly into the mic, please.
I'm a city club member, William Moore, and I used to work for the U.S. Department of Commerce, and so I read a lot of technical journals and Financial Times, and I do note that there is a lack of water all throughout the Sahara, and there's a little bit of water that comes to the west coast of Africa. That wasn't enough for some cities, and you can build a desalination plant. It has been built on the west coast of Africa that uses solar power to desalinate water from the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the ocean of the bay out there. The technology is being developed. Oh my! Oh, how about? Whew. So, did you all hear enough earlier, or should I repeat it?
And
Okay.
can I ask, do you have a question?
Somebody has a question already?
No, have you asked, do you have a question?
Oh no, I just and the question is, will you all be taking a look at scientific journals to find out about the process of industrial scale desalination for farming that's currently practiced at least on the west coast of Africa? Thank you.
Anybody? Bob?
So I'm not gonna, I don't know specifically the answer to your question about the west coast of Africa, but I do represent City of Linden, I represent water and sewer districts and associations, and in the course of that I can tell you that a number of different solutions have been looked at. Desalination is one that always rises up as a potential. It's always, at least up until now in my career anyway, been ruled out as too expensive, and maybe that's, actually shaking your head, so maybe it needs to be looked at again. But there's lots of solutions. The point I want to make is there's lots of solutions out there, not just desalination, water reclamation, but as Ander mentioned, there's lots of water in this area. There's water in November through April, sometimes more than we want. And really, it's not a question of does this region have water. We're not the Sahara Desert. We have lots of water. It just doesn't come all at the right time. So we need some more water, cool, clear water coming in July, August, September, when there's salmon in the streams and the water temperature rises and there's low water levels. Those are the times we need water. Those solutions can be found. I can tell you that Linden is immediately near putting out a final report on a study that they've been doing with a local hydrological firm, which is focusing on managed aquifer recovery. And the idea is put a pipe in the river, say the Nooksack River, and withdraw some water in those high water months, let it settle down, store it underground, and have the water percolate into back into the river in the low water months. And that, following up on the Walla Walla question Mr. Douglas had, that has been done in Walla Walla, that exact thing. And so it's been done before. It's tricky because it requires the right location, it requires the right soils, and all of those things have to be factored in to get the water coming back into the stream at the right time. Things like that are possible, and you don't necessarily need to have a big reservoir built, but you could have some off-channel storage. You can have water stored underground. It happens all over the country. And the project I mentioned from Linden is a creative project that, in Linden's case, what they would do is, if this comes to pass, is they would add in-stream flow into the river at a time when it needs it most. Cool water in July, August, and maybe take 25% of the water added for out-of-stream consumption. So there was some benefit for Linden as well. those kinds of solutions are possible. One of the things that was mentioned at a water panel that I was at a year or so ago, I asked a UW law professor who was an expert on water rights who'd studied adjudications throughout the West. He said he'd studied 39 resolutions of adjudications that involved tribes. And I asked him the question, how many of those, out of 39 that he studied, how many of those involved federal money to resolve? And he said 38 out of the 39. Ultimately, this is a treaty issue to start with. It's not the only issue, but it's probably the biggest issue. And I agree with what the Lummi representative said. I actually agree with, and as the Linden City Attorney, I agree with most of what you said. There are solutions that are out there that are available to people. They need to be funded. And there is the possibility of federal funding. I do think that that's where this is going to end up at some point to solve the problems that we have. And I wanted to make that optimistic point so that we don't all leave here completely depressed about the water solutions. I think there can be solutions that protect fish and provide water for people. We just need to fund it.
Do you have a question?
I was gonna add.
Oh, go ahead, Victor.
I was just gonna add to that, you know, it's what's, basically what we're kind of talking about here is, you know, it's kind of like a pie. In times where we have a lot of the pie, it's big, you know, it gets really big, and then the tribes will have their share, right? There's 2 tribes here in Whatcom County, and you'll know what that is, and then the rest of the county can fight over whatever's left. But the thing that I really want to emphasize is you will know what that portion is after this adjudication. Right now, you don't know. And I think that's really important to understand, is like the pie grows in the winter and it shrinks in the summer, but we will know whose portion is which portion, and that really helps with certainty.
Maybe one last question here.
Sort of an administrative question. I purchased a house that's very old, built in 1913. Now, over the years, it's had multiple owners. And I was wondering if water rights had been acquired during those years, where that might be recorded.
Anybody want to take that? Bob, thank you.
So I would recommend that you talk with those 2 ladies in the back of the Department of Ecology. Department of Ecology has a website, and they track all water certificates, permits, claims that have been filed that are in their database, and you can look that up. You can look up your property.
In the Department of Ecology
Right.
website.
And we do,
Yes.
yeah, and to
Yes.
we have Sheila and Kelly. Kelly. Oh, you're hiding. Okay, all right. The post is in the way. They are back here. They are from the Department of Ecology. They have brought information. For those of you who are going to be filing, they are here to help you. Allison, do you have one last quick thing?
I'm on the board of City Club, and I just wanted to thank everyone that was here, but could we get like a show of hands of who our audience is? Like, how many of you were farmers? How many of you live in Blaine? How many from Ferndale? What about Sumas? Everson, Nooksack? Linden?
I live in a rural area.
Okay, rural areas. Bellingham. Interesting.
Lummi Reservation.
It's a holiday, Victor. I'm going to wrap up. And my name is Jane Bright. I am the program committee chair, and that is truly a privilege. And I just want to give you a quick preview of some of the things coming up for the rest of the year. We will be doing a program on the Supreme Court sometime in the spring. In June, we're going to be doing a program on the jail. The follow-up, you may recall, we had a program last year. We're going to do an update where we are today. And needless to say, with the change of administration in Washington, there are other topics that we expect to take on when we have a little more information. Tariffs and immigration leap to mind. Ukraine, NATO, we're not going to run out of things to talk about. So I just encourage you to, as Jim mentioned, to, if you're not already a member, please join. Our costs exceed, what we take in at the door here. It's membership that keeps us going. And we want to hear from our members too in terms of what they're interested in talking about. And I want to thank our incredible panelists. This has been so informative, and I also want to thank Dan. I cannot tell you how much time and effort Dan put into pulling this together because it is so huge. How do you cram it into 1.5 hours? And yet he did it. So if I could ask for a round of applause for our panel and Dan. Thank you all, and as I say, please consider either renewing your membership or becoming members. Thank you.